Sometimes a single object can carry a secret powerful enough to change two lives forever. Emily Carter had heard that old saying from her mother many times growing up, but she never imagined how true it would become. The rain had started just after sunset, turning the narrow roads outside Chicago slick and reflective under the glow of passing headlights. Emily finished her shift at a small family restaurant located along a busy highway exit and stepped outside carrying a worn canvas bag over her shoulder. At 48 years old, she had spent most of her life working long hours, serving customers, and doing whatever was necessary to make ends meet. Her life was simple. She rented a modest apartment. She drove an aging pickup truck. She rarely bought anything for herself. Yet despite the challenges she faced, she remained remarkably optimistic. As she walked toward her truck, she noticed a luxury black sedan parked on the shoulder of the road a short distance away. The hood was raised. A man stood beside it staring into the engine compartment with obvious frustration. Emily might have continued driving home if she had not recognized the expression on his face. It was the look of someone who felt completely stranded. She pulled over and lowered her window. "Everything okay?" she called out. The man turned toward her. He appeared to be in his early 60s. His expensive suit was slightly damp from the rain. "Not exactly," he admitted. The car suddenly stopped responding. "I have been waiting almost an hour for assistance." Emily parked and stepped out. "Mind if I take a look?" The man seemed surprised. "You know something about engines?" Emily smiled. "My father owned a repair shop when I was growing up. I spent half my childhood handing him tools." The man stepped aside. Emily leaned over the engine and began examining the components. After several minutes, she spotted a loose connection. It was a minor issue, but enough to create the problem. She secured it carefully and asked the man to try starting the vehicle again. A moment later the engine came to life smoothly. The man's eyes widened. "You are kidding." Emily laughed softly. "Nope. Looks like that was the problem." The man shook his head in disbelief. "You just saved me a very expensive towing bill." Emily shrugged. "Happy to help." The man extended his hand. "William Harrison." Emily shook it. "Emily Carter." Neither recognized the other. Emily did not follow financial news. William rarely paid attention to ordinary people outside his business world. For a brief moment, they stood beneath the light rain listening to the engine idle steadily. William reached into his wallet. "Please let me compensate you." Emily immediately raised a hand. "That is not necessary. I insist." Honestly, it took 5 minutes. William pulled out several $100 bills. Emily stepped back. "No thank you." The refusal surprised him. Most people accepted money without hesitation. Emily simply smiled. As she adjusted the collar of her jacket, a small silver necklace slipped into view beneath the fabric. The pendant hanging from it caught the light from a nearby street lamp. William's expression changed instantly. The color seemed to drain from his face. His eyes locked onto the necklace. Emily noticed his sudden silence. "Are you okay?" she asked. William did not answer immediately. He stared at the pendant as though he had seen a ghost. The necklace was old. The silver had faded with age. Yet its distinctive design remained unmistakable. He knew that design. He had seen it before. Many years ago. Decades ago. In fact, there had once been only 2 of them in existence. Emily instinctively touched the pendant resting against her chest. "Something wrong?" she asked again. William finally looked up, but the shock remained in his eyes. "Where did you get that necklace?" he asked quietly. Emily frowned. "I have had it my entire life." Rain continued falling around them as neither realized that a simple roadside encounter had just reopened a mystery buried for more than 30 years. Emily Carter looked down at the necklace resting against her chest and then back at William Harrison. His reaction made no sense. For years, people had occasionally complimented the pendant because of its unusual design, but nobody had ever stared at it with such shock. The rain continued falling softly around them as traffic moved through the darkness nearby. "Why are you asking?" Emily said. William seemed to collect his thoughts before answering. "Because I recognize it." Emily frowned. "That is impossible." William shook his head slowly. "I do not think it is." For several seconds neither spoke. Emily instinctively held the pendant in her hand. It was a small silver piece shaped like an intricate compass surrounded by delicate engraving. Time had worn away some of the details, but she had never taken it off. Her mother had given it to her when she was a little girl. "My mother told me it belonged to our family," Emily explained. "That is all I know." William stared at the necklace again. The memory was so vivid that it felt impossible. More than 30 years earlier, he had seen an identical pendant hanging around the neck of someone he loved. Someone whose absence had left a permanent wound on his family. "Where is your mother now?" he asked quietly. Emily's expression softened. "She passed away several years ago." William lowered his eyes. "I am sorry." Emily nodded politely. "Thank you." The conversation felt increasingly strange. She had only stopped to help a stranger fix a car. Now that stranger seemed deeply connected to a necklace she had worn her entire life. William finally reached into his wallet and removed a business card. "If you ever feel comfortable talking more about this necklace, please call me." Emily accepted the card. The name printed on it immediately caught her attention. William Harrison. Harrison Global Industries. Even Emily recognized the company. Her eyes widened slightly. "You are William Harrison?" she asked. William offered a small smile. "I am." Emily laughed softly in disbelief. "I had no idea. Most people do not stop to help me repair my car long enough to ask." For the first time that evening, both shared a brief smile. Yet the mystery remained. After saying goodbye, Emily climbed into her pickup truck and drove home. During the entire drive, she found herself replaying the conversation. Something about William's reaction felt genuine. He had not looked curious. He had looked shaken. Across the city, William arrived at his penthouse shortly before midnight. Normally he would have reviewed financial reports before going to bed. Instead, he headed directly toward a storage room rarely opened anymore. After several minutes of searching through old boxes, he finally found what he was looking for. A faded family photo album. Sitting alone in his study, he carefully turned page after page. Birthdays. Holidays. Family vacations. Then he found it. His breath caught. In a photograph taken more than 3 decades earlier, a young woman stood smiling beside him. Around her neck hung a silver pendant identical to the one Emily wore. William stared at the image for a long time. The resemblance was undeniable. The design had been custom-made. Only 2 existed. One belonged to his sister. The other had disappeared years ago along with several unanswered questions. His pulse quickened as he continued examining old photographs. Memories flooded back. Family arguments. Sudden departures. Painful events nobody discussed anymore. By 2 o'clock in the morning, William still sat at his desk surrounded by photographs and documents. The more he thought about Emily, the less likely coincidence seemed. Somewhere beyond the necklace was a story that had remained hidden for decades. And for the first time in many years, William found himself unable to ignore the possibility that a chance encounter on a rainy roadside had connected him to a mystery he believed was lost forever. For the next several days, Emily Carter tried to put the strange encounter behind her. She returned to her normal routine, working long shifts at the restaurant and spending quiet evenings at home. Yet every time she caught sight of the silver pendant in a mirror, she found herself thinking about William Harrison's reaction. The image of shock on his face had been impossible to ignore. Several times she considered calling the number on the business card sitting on her kitchen table. Each time she decided against it. She had lived her entire life without answers about the necklace. Why start chasing them now? Meanwhile, William Harrison found himself unable to focus on anything else. During board meetings, his thoughts drifted back to the roadside encounter. During business dinners, he caught himself staring into space while replaying old memories. Eventually curiosity overcame caution. One afternoon he called the restaurant where Emily worked and made a reservation in her section. When he arrived that evening, Emily immediately recognized him. Surprise flashed across her face. "Mr. Harrison," she said. "Good evening." William smiled politely. "Please call me William." Emily nodded but remained cautious. Throughout the meal, she treated him like any other customer. Only after the dinner rush slowed did William finally ask the question that had been occupying his mind for days. "Would you sit with me for a few minutes?" Emily hesitated before agreeing. They moved to a quiet corner booth near the back of the restaurant. Outside the windows, the Chicago skyline glowed against the night sky. William looked at the pendant around her neck. "You said your mother gave it to you." Emily nodded. "When I was about 7 years old." "Did she ever explain where it came from?" Emily shook her head. "Not really. Whenever I asked, she would simply say it belonged to our family and that I should never lose it." William listened carefully. "What about your father?" A brief sadness crossed Emily's face. "I never knew him." William remained silent. Emily continued. "My mother raised me alone. She rarely talked about the past. There were photographs she kept hidden in a box, but she never explained who the people were." "Do you still have them?" William asked. Emily looked surprised by the question. "A few of them. Would you be willing to show me someday?" She studied his expression. He did not seem motivated by money or curiosity alone. There was something more personal behind his questions. "Why is this so important to you?" Emily asked. William took a slow breath. For the first time, he decided to tell part of the truth. "Because I have seen that necklace before." Emily felt a chill run through her. "Where?" William lowered his eyes briefly. "My younger sister wore one exactly like it." The restaurant suddenly felt quieter. Emily stared at him. "Exactly like it?" "Every detail." He nodded. "There were only 2 ever made." Emily struggled to process what she was hearing. William continued carefully. "Many years ago, my sister disappeared from our lives under complicated circumstances. We lost contact. Eventually everyone assumed the story had ended." Emily instinctively touched the pendant again. "And now you think it is connected to her?" "I do not know what to think," William admitted. "But I cannot ignore the possibility." Neither spoke for several moments. The sounds of dishes and distant conversations filled the silence. Finally Emily said something she had never admitted to anyone outside her family. "There is something else." William immediately looked up. "What?" Emily glanced toward the window. "A few weeks before my mother passed away, she told me there was a truth about our family she had never been able to explain." William's heart began racing. "What truth?" Emily slowly shook her head. "She never got the chance to tell me. She became ill before she could finish the conversation." The mystery that had seemed impossible only days earlier suddenly felt more real than ever. And for both of them, the unanswered questions were growing harder to ignore. The conversation stayed in Emily Carter's mind long after William Harrison left the restaurant. That night, she returned to her apartment carrying more questions than answers. For years she had accepted the mystery surrounding her family history. Her mother rarely discussed the past, and eventually Emily stopped asking. Life became busy. Bills needed to be paid. Work demanded her attention. The unanswered questions remained locked away like old boxes in a forgotten attic. Yet now those questions had suddenly returned. After changing clothes, Emily walked toward a small closet in the corner of her bedroom. On the highest shelf sat a cardboard box she had not opened in nearly 3 years. Dust covered the lid. She carefully carried it to the kitchen table and opened it. Inside were photographs, letters, greeting cards, and several personal belongings that once belonged to her mother. Emily slowly sorted through the contents. Most of the photographs showed ordinary moments. Birthdays. School. Events. Family gatherings with people she barely remembered. Then she found a small envelope tucked between 2 photo albums. Her pulse quickened. She had never noticed it before. Inside was a faded photograph showing her mother standing beside a young woman with strikingly similar features. Around the young woman's neck hung a silver pendant identical to Emily's. For several seconds, Emily simply stared. The discovery felt impossible. The date written on the back of the photograph made it even stranger. It had been taken years before Emily was born. Meanwhile, across Chicago, William sat alone in his study surrounded by family records. After speaking with Emily, he became convinced that coincidence could no longer explain what was happening. He contacted an elderly family attorney who had handled legal matters for the Harrison family decades earlier. The attorney agreed to meet the following morning. During their conversation, William reviewed old records connected to his missing sister. Most documents revealed nothing new. Then the attorney uncovered a forgotten file buried among archived paperwork. The file contained correspondence from more than 30 years earlier. William carefully examined each page. One particular document immediately caught his attention. It referenced travel arrangements made shortly before his sister vanished from the family's life. The destination listed on the document matched the exact region where Emily's mother had lived years later. William felt a chill run through him. Another piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. 2 days later, Emily called him. Her voice sounded uncertain. I found something. William immediately asked to meet. That afternoon they sat across from each other inside a quiet coffee shop. Emily placed the photograph on the table between them. William picked it up and froze. The young woman in the picture was unmistakable. Although many years younger, she looked exactly like the sister he remembered. His hands trembled slightly. Emily watched his reaction carefully. You recognize her? William slowly nodded. I do. Emily leaned forward. Who is she? William looked at the photograph for several seconds. Before answering. Her name was Claire Harrison. Emily felt her stomach tighten. The room suddenly seemed smaller. Your sister. William nodded again. Neither spoke. Outside, people walked past the cafe windows unaware that 2 lives were being quietly reshaped. Finally Emily broke the silence. If this really is your sister, how did my mother know her? William wished he had an answer. Instead, he reached into his briefcase and removed a copy of the old travel document. Emily studied it carefully. The same location appeared repeatedly throughout the file. A location connected to both women. The evidence was beginning to form a pattern neither could ignore. Yet one critical question remained unanswered. What happened between Claire Harrison and Emily's mother all those years ago? As they left the cafe that afternoon, both understood that the mystery had become far bigger than a necklace. Somewhere in the past existed a hidden truth connecting their families. And with every new discovery, they moved one step closer to uncovering it. Over the following weeks, the mystery began pulling Emily Carter and William Harrison into each other's lives in ways neither expected. What started as a chance encounter beside a broken car had become a search for answers that seemed buried beneath decades of silence. Yet despite the growing evidence, neither was prepared for the emotional impact of what they might discover. Emily continued working at the restaurant during the day, but her evenings were now spent sorting through old family belongings. Every photograph, letter, and faded receipt felt important. She examined dates, names, and locations with a level of attention she had never given them before. The deeper she looked, the more she realized how little she truly knew about her mother's past. One evening she discovered a small notebook hidden inside an old dresser drawer. Most of its pages contained ordinary notes and shopping lists. Then she noticed several entries mentioning the same town listed in William's documents. Her heart raced. The connection could no longer be ignored. Meanwhile, William dedicated increasing amounts of time to investigating his family's history. He contacted former friends, distant relatives, and anyone who might remember the events surrounding Claire Harrison's disappearance. Most conversations led nowhere. Memories had faded. Records had been lost. Yet one detail appeared repeatedly. During the months before Claire vanished from the family's life, she had spent significant time helping a close friend who was struggling financially. Nobody could remember the friend's full name. Nobody knew what eventually happened to her. But William could not shake the feeling that this forgotten friendship somehow connected everything. As their search continued, Emily and William began meeting regularly. Sometimes they met in coffee shops. Other times they reviewed documents together at William's office. Their relationship slowly changed. The distance that once existed between a waitress and a billionaire gradually disappeared. Emily discovered that beneath William's wealth and success was a man carrying years of regret. William discovered that beneath Emily's modest lifestyle was remarkable resilience and kindness. One afternoon, while reviewing photographs together, Emily noticed something unusual. In the background of a picture showing her mother and the young woman believed to be Claire Harrison stood an elderly man wearing a distinctive jacket with the logo of a local community center. William immediately recognized the location. The building still existed. It had served the same neighborhood for decades. The discovery gave them a new lead. The following day they visited the center together. The facility had been renovated several times over the years, but some longtime staff members remained. After speaking with several employees, they were directed to an 80-year-old volunteer named Harold Bennett. Harold had worked there for nearly 40 years and possessed an extraordinary memory. When shown the photograph, his expression changed instantly. "I remember them," he said. Emily and William exchanged stunned looks. Harold studied the picture carefully. "Those two women came here often. They volunteered together for almost a year." William leaned forward. "Do you remember their names?" Harold nodded. Slowly. "One was Claire. The other was named Susan." Emily felt her breath catch. Susan was her mother's name. Harold continued speaking. They were extremely close friends. Practically inseparable. Every answer seemed to generate even larger questions. If Claire Harrison and Susan Carter had been such close friends, why had nobody ever spoken about it? Why had Susan hidden so much of her past? And how had the necklace passed from Claire to Emily? Before they left, Harold shared one final detail. "I remember Claire saying she was planning to leave town," he said. "She told Susan there was something important she needed to protect." William felt a chill move through him. "Did she ever say what it was?" Harold shook his head. "No. But she seemed frightened of losing it." As Emily and William walked back toward the parking lot, neither spoke for several moments. The mystery was no longer centered on a necklace alone. Somewhere in the missing years between Claire Harrison and Susan Carter existed a secret powerful enough to alter multiple lives. And for the first time, they could sense they were getting dangerously close to uncovering it. The drive back from the community center felt unusually quiet. Emily Carter sat in the passenger seat staring out the window while Chicago moved past in a blur of lights and traffic. Harold Bennett's words repeated in her mind. Claire Harrison had trusted her mother. Claire had been protecting something. And somehow that responsibility had survived for more than 30 years without Emily ever knowing it existed. William Harrison felt the same restless uncertainty. Every new answer seemed to uncover an even deeper mystery beneath it. For decades he had believed his sister simply disappeared from his life after a painful family conflict. Now he was beginning to realize that Claire may have been carrying a burden nobody else understood. The following morning, William received an unexpected phone call from the elderly attorney who had helped review old Harrison family records. "I found something else," the attorney said. Within an hour William was sitting across from him in a conference room surrounded by faded files and storage boxes. The attorney carefully placed a sealed envelope on the table. "This was misfiled years ago," he explained. "It was addressed to your sister but never delivered." William stared at the envelope. His pulse quickened. The postmark dated back more than 3 decades. With trembling hands he opened it. Inside was a letter written by Claire herself. The handwriting was immediately recognizable. William had not seen it in years. He slowly began reading. Much of the letter described Claire's concerns about family disagreements and her desire to create a peaceful future away from conflict. Then one paragraph captured his full attention. Claire wrote that she trusted only one person to help her protect what mattered most. That person's name was Susan Carter. William sat frozen. Susan was Emily's mother. The connection was no longer speculation. It was documented fact. Later that afternoon William called Emily and asked if they could meet immediately. They gathered in his office overlooking downtown Chicago. Emily listened carefully as William handed her the letter. The moment she read her mother's name, her eyes widened. "This is impossible," she whispered. William shook his head. "I do not think it is." Emily continued reading. Near the end of the letter Claire mentioned a keepsake she hoped would remain in trusted hands until the truth could one day be revealed. No specific object was identified. Yet both of them immediately thought about the necklace. "My mother never told me any of this," Emily said softly. William looked out the window. Maybe she was protecting a promise. The room fell silent. Suddenly Emily remembered something she had overlooked for years. "There is another box," she said. William turned toward her. "What do you mean?" "When my mother passed away, there was a locked wooden box among her belongings. I never managed to open it." William felt a surge of anticipation. "Do you still have it?" Emily nodded. "In a storage unit." They drove there immediately. The unit contained furniture, family possessions, and dozens of forgotten items. After nearly an hour of searching, Emily finally located the small wooden box. Dust covered its surface. The lock remained intact. She carried it carefully back to William's office. A locksmith was called. Both waited anxiously as the old lock was opened for the first time in decades. Inside they found several photographs, a few personal letters, and a sealed envelope marked with handwriting that made William's heart stop. It belonged to Claire Harrison. Emily slowly picked up the envelope. Neither spoke. For years it had remained hidden in darkness. Whatever answers existed might finally be inside. Yet as Emily examined the front, she noticed something unexpected. Written beneath Claire's name was a short note addressed directly to a person identified only by initials. Initials that matched neither Susan Carter nor anyone William recognized. Suddenly the mystery became even larger than before. Whoever those initials belonged to might hold the missing piece of a story that had remained buried for more than 30 years. Emily Carter and William Harrison sat in silence as the sealed envelope rested on the desk between them. For several minutes neither moved. After spending weeks uncovering clues, they had finally reached a piece of evidence left behind by Claire Harrison herself. Yet the unfamiliar initials written beneath Claire's name created a new layer of uncertainty. Emily carefully turned the envelope over. The seal had weakened with age but remained intact. William took a slow breath. "I think we have waited long enough." Emily nodded. With steady hands, she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter folded several times and a small photograph. William immediately recognized Claire. She appeared younger than in the other pictures they had found. Standing beside her was a man neither of them recognized. On the back of the photograph were the same initials written on the envelope. Emily placed the picture aside and unfolded the letter. The handwriting matched the other documents perfectly. Together they began reading. Claire explained that circumstances beyond her control had forced her to leave her old life behind. She wrote about trust, loyalty, and the importance of protecting the people she loved. Several paragraphs focused on Susan Carter. Claire described Susan as the most dependable friend she had ever known. Emily felt tears forming as she read those words. Her mother had carried this secret without ever revealing it. Then the letter became even more surprising. Claire wrote that if anything happened to her, Susan would know how to safeguard the truth until the right time arrived. William leaned forward. "Keep reading." Emily continued. Near the end of the letter, Claire mentioned the man in the photograph. His name was Daniel Mercer. According to the letter, Daniel had helped her during one of the most difficult periods of her life. More importantly, he possessed information that connected everything. Emily looked up. "Do you know him?" William slowly shook his head. "I have never heard that name before." The discovery raised even more questions. Why had Claire trusted this man? What information did he possess? And why had nobody in the Harrison family ever mentioned him? Determined to find answers, William instructed his research team to begin searching immediately. 2 days later they received a breakthrough. Daniel Mercer was still alive. He was 84 years old and living in a small town several hours outside Chicago. The moment William received the report, he called Emily. The following morning they began the drive together. During the trip, neither could hide their anticipation. For Emily, every mile felt like a step closer to understanding her identity. For William, it felt like a final opportunity to learn what truly happened to his sister. By early afternoon they arrived at a modest house surrounded by large oak trees. An elderly man answered the door. Although age had changed his appearance, there was no doubt he was the same person from the photograph. Daniel listened quietly as they explained why they had come. The moment William showed him Claire's picture, emotion filled his eyes. He invited them inside. For nearly an hour Daniel shared memories he had carried for decades. He confirmed that Claire and Susan had been close friends. He confirmed that Claire trusted Susan completely. Then he revealed something neither Emily nor William expected. Claire had spent the final years of her life searching for a way to reconnect with her family. She never stopped loving them. William lowered his head as guilt washed over him. For years he had believed Claire chose to disappear. The truth was far more complicated. Daniel then said something that made the room fall silent. Before she passed away, Claire left instructions in case her family was ever found. Emily felt her heart pounding. William stared at him. Daniel slowly stood and walked toward a cabinet. From inside he removed a worn leather folder that had remained untouched for decades. Whatever was inside that folder had waited more than 30 years to be discovered. Emily Carter and William Harrison watched silently as Daniel Mercer placed the worn leather folder on the table between them. The folder looked ordinary, yet all three understood it contained answers that had remained hidden for more than 30 years. Daniel carefully opened it and removed several documents protected inside transparent sleeves. The first was a handwritten letter from Claire Harrison. The second was a collection of photographs. The third was a sealed legal document that appeared untouched since the day it was prepared. Emily could feel her heart racing. Daniel handed Claire's letter to William first. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the pages. For decades he had searched for explanations about his sister's disappearance. Now her own words were finally in front of him. The room remained completely silent as he began reading. Claire explained that she never intended to separate herself permanently from her family. Circumstances had become complicated, and she feared that certain misunderstandings would place innocent people in difficult situations. Rather than create additional conflict, she chose distance. Yet one sentence immediately captured William's attention. Claire wrote that her greatest concern was protecting a child whose future depended on secrecy until the proper time arrived. William slowly lowered the letter. Emily stared at him. "A child?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "Keep reading." William continued. Several paragraphs later, Claire described Susan Carter's role in helping her safeguard that child. She praised Susan's loyalty and compassion, writing that she trusted her more than anyone else. Emily felt tears gathering in her eyes. Every new detail revealed a side of her mother she had never fully known. Then William reached the final page. His expression changed completely. He read the final paragraph twice before speaking. "Claire says the child carried a connection to both families." Emily leaned forward. "What does that mean?" Before William could answer, Daniel carefully opened the sealed legal document. Inside was a notarized statement signed by Claire years earlier. The statement confirmed that if questions ever arose about the child's identity, specific evidence had been preserved to establish the truth. Attached to the document was a photograph. Emily immediately recognized her mother. Standing beside Susan was Claire. Between them stood a little girl approximately 5 years old. The little girl wore the same silver necklace now hanging around Emily's neck. Emily stared at the image. "That is me," she whispered. William looked at the photograph and felt emotion overwhelm him. For the first time, he was looking at evidence connecting Emily directly to a chapter of his family's history. Daniel then revealed the final item inside the folder. It was a small envelope containing official records that had remained sealed for decades. Claire's instructions were simple. If the families were ever reunited, the records were to be shared. Emily carefully examined the documents. Several names appeared repeatedly. Dates matched the timeline they had spent weeks reconstructing. Every piece seemed to point toward the same conclusion. Yet one final question remained unanswered. The evidence strongly suggested a blood relationship between Emily and Claire Harrison, but none of the documents explicitly confirmed it. William looked toward Daniel. "Did Claire ever explain why she left these instructions?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Because she hoped the truth would eventually bring people together instead of tearing them apart." The elderly man paused before continuing. "She believed there would come a day when proof would no longer be dangerous." Emily looked down at the photograph of herself as a child standing between Claire and Susan. The image felt surreal. For years she believed her life began with unanswered questions. Now she realized those answers might have existed all along, waiting patiently for discovery. As evening settled outside Daniel's home, William gathered the documents carefully. The evidence had brought them closer than ever before. Yet both understood that only one step remained. To remove all doubt, they would need definitive confirmation. And as they prepared to leave, the possibility that had once seemed impossible now felt closer than ever. The truth about Emily's identity was finally within reach. The following weeks felt unlike anything Emily Carter had ever experienced. For most of her life, questions about her family history existed as distant shadows. Now those shadows were finally giving way to answers. The documents discovered in Daniel Mercer's possession had revealed an extraordinary connection between her mother, Claire Harrison, and the mysterious past that had remained hidden for decades. Yet one final step remained before speculation could become certainty. After discussing the matter carefully, both Emily and William Harrison agreed to proceed with formal testing to confirm the relationship suggested by the evidence. Neither approached the decision lightly. For Emily, the results could redefine everything she believed about her identity. For William, they could bring closure to a chapter of family history that had haunted him for more than 30 years. Several days later, they met again in William's office overlooking downtown Chicago. The atmosphere felt calm but tense. Neither spoke much while waiting for the results. Instead, they spent time reviewing old photographs and letters discovered throughout their search. What had once seemed like random fragments now formed a remarkable story of friendship, sacrifice, and loyalty. When the call finally arrived, William answered immediately. As he listened, his expression slowly changed. Emily watched silently. After several moments, he lowered the phone and looked at her. His eyes were filled with emotion. "The results are conclusive," he said quietly. Emily felt her heart pounding. William struggled briefly to compose himself before continuing. "Claire Harrison was your biological aunt." The room fell silent. Emily stared at him, unable to speak. Every clue they had uncovered suddenly aligned. The necklace. The photographs. The letters. The hidden records. All of it pointed toward the same truth. Claire had spent years protecting a family connection that only now could finally be understood. Tears filled Emily's eyes as she looked down at the silver pendant resting against her chest. What she once believed was simply a keepsake had actually carried the story of an entire family. William sat quietly for several moments before speaking again. "My sister never stopped trying to protect the people she loved." Emily nodded slowly. "And my mother kept her promise." In that moment, both understood that the real heroes of the story had been Claire Harrison and Susan Carter. Two women who carried an enormous responsibility without seeking recognition. Their friendship had preserved the truth until the right time arrived. Several months later, William organized a private family gathering. Relatives traveled from different parts of the country. Old photographs were displayed throughout the room. Stories were shared. Memories long forgotten were finally spoken aloud. For the first time in her life, Emily felt connected to a larger family history. She listened as relatives described Claire's kindness, generosity, and determination. Many traits sounded surprisingly familiar. More than once, people remarked how much Emily reminded them of her aunt. As the evening continued, William approached Emily carrying a small wooden case. Inside were several personal belongings that once belonged to Claire, including letters, photographs, and family keepsakes. He carefully placed the box in Emily's hands. "These belong with you," he said. Emily felt overwhelmed by emotion. The value of the items had nothing to do with money. They represented belonging. They represented answers. They represented a part of herself she never knew existed. Later that evening, Emily stepped outside onto the terrace, overlooking the city lights. She touched the silver necklace and smiled. Everything had started because of a broken car on a rainy night. A simple act of kindness had opened a door to a truth hidden for decades. William joined her a few moments later. Together they looked out across the skyline. Neither needed to say much. The mystery had ended, but something more important had begun. Family had been restored. Questions had been answered. Promises had been honored. And the necklace that once symbolized uncertainty now stood as a reminder that even the smallest object can carry a story powerful enough to reunite generations.